Special thanks to our promotional partners at the American Philatelic Society.
The APS is the largest stamp collecting organization in the world, supporting collectors of any level worldwide.
For more information about membership and APS services, visit stamps.org.
I'm Charles Epting from HR Harmer in New York City.
And I'm Michael Cortese of NobleSpirit in Pittsfield, New Hampshire.
And this is Conversations with Philatelists. Now, Michael, I'm really excited about today's guest. Tobias Huylmans has been a friend and colleague of mine since I started in the business. He's actually the gentleman who I lived with when I went to Heinrich Kohler in Germany for 2 months. To the way I actually got this job, he was kind enough. He and his wife were kind enough to host me in their home for weeks and weeks on end, which I don't know how they agreed to have some random American who nobody had met live with them. But in that time, Toby became one of my absolute favorite people, and he is a mentor and somebody I look up to. And if you can't tell, I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. This is like, it's amazing how things came full circle. He was interviewing me basically when I went to live with him, and now we're interviewing him. So this is so a little bit of background, but I'll let Toby do most of the talking. But not only does he work for Heinrich Kohler, but he's an expert in Memo and which is a World War I plebiscite and several other European areas. So he is a certified expert who people submit material to, and he writes certificates, in addition to being an auction lot describer and just all around rock star of the philatelic world. And we wanted to make a disclaimer before this episode as well.
Yeah, so a little look behind the curtain is we usually
people don't want looks behind the curtains. You act as if this is like interesting knowledge, people. But yes, go ahead.
But, I mean, a little. We're recording the intro as we do for most of our episodes after the actual episode. We spend a decent amount of time talking with Toby and looking at how he certifies material, how he expertises material. So there's an incredibly large portion of this episode that you just need to watch. He
shared his screen and he walked us through his process, and yeah, agree. This is one where it would be interesting to listen to, I think. But if you're not watching on YouTube, you're missing a lot of the really great stuff. So we urge everybody, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever right now, press pause, go to YouTube and watch this video,
or at least listen to it and then make it like notations as to where.
That's what I expect of our listeners.
No.
Pat around with them.
I mean,
I want them to make it. At 12:53, I'm gonna have to go see what they show at that timestamp. No, don't do that.
Possible.
Don't listen to the video and make annotations. I don't want any of our listeners making annotations. Just pause it completely and go watch the video.
Yeah, it's super interesting stuff.
And it's worth seeing. So
it's definitely worth seeing. Yeah,
not worth annotating.
Yeah.
I
like listening to audio. I like listening to audio. You know, I'm not one myself. I don't watch on YouTube.
That's usually how audio is consumed by the human senses, is by listening to it. Let's bring Toby on.
All right, here we go. Let's bring him on.
Good morning.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Nice to meet you, Toby.
Hi, nice to meet you. Yes.
Toby, this is Michael with the eBay store.
Yeah, I have to apologize for my haircut, but since lockdown is only over for a couple of days, I had no chance to get a proper haircut.
So Toby, to kick things off, can you talk a little bit, just first and foremost, about your introductions to the hobby, how you got interested in stamp collecting, and then a little bit about what it is you do nowadays, both professionally in your role with Heinrich Kohler, as well as your expertising half of your life as well.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I became interested, I guess, rather late compared to other people. I think I must have been like 13 or 14 when I inherited a little collection from my grandmother. She gave it to me because obviously no one else in the family was interested. And she said, well, go have fun with it. It's interesting, as she knew I have a thing for history. And so I took, I think it was 7 albums. I took them home and I looked at the stamps, for day and night. And after a few weeks, I realized with the literature I have, I can't do anything because it has a very limited scope. So, and in Germany, we have something called the specialized catalog. So I bought this and got involved further and further. And within like 6 or 7 weeks, I decided to apply for an apprenticeship in an auction house. And back then it was a very small auction house in Cologne. It doesn't exist anymore, but that's not my fault. And yeah, I started to work there in the school time, and no, not in the school time. What is it? In my holidays. And yeah, from there it just continued. From there I started to work in another auction house for a couple of years, where I used to work then later. Yeah, so that's how basically I got involved.
And where you are now, you are an expert for the BPP.
Yes, I'm a member of the BPP and the AIAP.
I think there's probably a lot of Americans who are not familiar with the BPP and the AIEP as well. So could you talk a little bit about what those governing bodies are, and sort of talk about the maybe this can just segue into the conversation I really wanted to have with you, which is the differences between American expertising systems and European expertising systems.
Okay, so maybe basically then I first talk about the BPP, which is what I know best, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in order to become a BPP expert, there is basically a 2-step process, or maybe it's a 3-step process, but just let me explain. So you apply to the, basically it's the CEO of the BPP, and you have to send along your curriculum, certificate of good conduct. It's something from the state where they print out if you've been to prison or whatever.
Okay. I'm sure we have something like that here in the States too.
I'm sure you do. And obviously it should be empty, otherwise you have a problem. With that along, you send the description of your collection, the list of available literature, a list of the technology you have and can use for your expertizations, a proof of your, let's call it card index register. It can be hard copies, but it can be digital as well, no problem. And if everything seems good to the BPP people, you get an invitation for the first exam. And this first exam, it happens once a year, where they combine all the people that applied. It used to be in another city. Now it's in the office in Wiesbaden, which is quite convenient for me, because I'm nowadays one of the guy who's taking the exam from the people. Okay, and the first exam, which is generally considered to be the hardest task of what's coming. It's almost a full day where people ask you questions, show you stuff, want your opinion on stamps, and just general philately. So if you would expertise Hawaii, you also might be confronted with a stamp of Bavaria. So it's just to get a gist of how good you are in general philately. Because there are many things in expertising which you can solve without knowing something about the specific area. It's just the basic knowledge of philately stuff. So the test itself, people present you stock cards with regummed stamp, original gum, pin removed, cancellations, printed, painted in, altered in whatever kind you can imagine. And you have to basically write down your notes, and that's your test. And later you present it to the people, and they tell you, are you good or bad? And it sounds very easy, but I vividly remember when I went there. You know, you go there and you think, well, I'm the king of it all. So, and then you go home small like a dwarf, and but yeah, I passed, but in the good consciousness that I actually know nothing. So that was quite the experience back then. And yeah, so when the day is over, the people there will tell you, well, you failed, then you can come back one more time. And if you fail the second time, you're out, because you're, yeah, most likely not capable of handling this. And
so,
if,
no, go ahead. I was just going to ask you how you prepared for something like that. How did you study under someone, or?
This is actually the most tricky part of it all, because there's no really, there's no school or anything. You have to do this all by yourself, and this is maybe one of the biggest complaints people have towards the BPP, that they want experts, but they do not offer any help there. Yeah, we have some seminars going on, but this is not helping you much. You really have to work with the stamps to really understand this in the end. Yeah. Okay, and let's say you passed, then you will get invited to the second test, which is taking place one day before the annual meeting. And this test will only be on your chosen area of expertise. So this in general is much easier, and maybe 1 out of 30 people fail that test then, because it's just questions about your area. And there again, you get the stamp, and people check your card index register very thoroughly nowadays. So if you see my coverage there, yeah, a lot of this is full with card index register of stamps and covers people sent you, and you can track down the history and so on of stamps. Yeah, so this is basically the second test, and if you pass that, you will become an associate member for 3 years, and during these 3 years you are tutored by another BPP expert, which either is doing the same area as you or something related to it. So for the next 3 years, you have a guy you can ask everything, who will tell you, no, you didn't get that one too right, please reconsider before issuing the certificate. And that has proven to be very good, that you are outside, you are a member for everyone out there, but for the first 3 years you're in, you're actually tutored by a very experienced other expert. This does help a lot, and because I guess this is one of your questions later on, with you have one expert versus the committee.
Right. So from a user standpoint, if I have an American cover, I will submit this to the Philatelic Foundation or to PSE, and then the body will assume possession of this item and send it to who they think is the most relevant expert. Whereas if I have a rare stamp of Memo, I send it directly to you.
Yes.
And I pay you directly, and you send it back to me directly. And it is very much one-on-one between myself, the collector, and yourself, the expert.
Yes. Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about what that's like? Sort of the pros and cons that you see of having, you are Mr. Memo, you are the guy. So I think there's a lot of accountability in that regard. But I wonder if people might be concerned as well, because the Philatelic Foundation, for example, requires that multiple people sign off on an item before it receives a certificate. So on the one hand, you have accountability, but on the other hand, if the single expert were to make a mistake, there's maybe not as much oversight.
Nope, there may not be as much oversight, but as I said, you are tutored at least for 3 years. And when you do BPP expertising, it's for a very narrow area where you really are the expert. It's not like you would expertise Germany. I mean, look at just volume 1. What is it, like 1849 to 1945? It's, I don't know how many pages, 1,000, and you have like 60 different experts for that. So it's always a very small field. People actually know a hell lot of stuff about. And yeah, I guess that's the first difference.
I think another interesting difference between the European expertising world and the American expertising world, and this is something that fascinated me the first time I ever saw you at work, is that in America, you typically don't submit something for a certificate unless it's worth several $100s, or if it's an item that's known to be questionable. Whereas you receive submissions for stamps of the catalog $1. Is that, and instead, rather than writing a certificate, you will sign the back of the stamp or issue a mini certificate. Can you talk about sort of why you think there's this difference? Because a lot of people, if they get a 2-cent Colombian, they're not going to send that in for a certificate. Whereas, even the lower value Memo overprints, people want it to be approved by you.
Yeah, I don't even think it's a European thing. It's a very German thing. We have so many color varieties and plate flaws and whatsoever with very low real value, but still people just want to know if it is the real thing. And many people do it by themselves, but then when they sell it, everyone will tell them, listen, without the BPP signature on the back, it's worth $0. And that's the problem. But the other problem that arises then is you get a lot of stuff, and it's I don't want to say it's tough, but it's very time consuming to go through hundreds of stamps that are just worth like 10-20 euro. And I think many experts would like to focus more on the stuff 200 and above. So where it's really, I don't want to say it's not worth my time to go through these little things. That would be wrong. But the problem is that you have to pay as much attention to a $5 stamp as to a $1,000 stamp. It sounds stupid, but I get so much manipulated stuff that's worth less than $20. Yeah, with fake cancellations, fake overprints. And I guess the Germans just want to be sure what they buy is good.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but sometimes they pay more than the stamps are worth. In reality, just for peace of mind, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
One thing that we, Michael and I discussed beforehand, is and I feel like this must be something you've heard before. Is you work for Heinrich Kohler. You are a philatelist. You describe auction lots. You have a hand in the retail side of the market, in addition to being an expert. And I've heard from people that there might be concerns of conflict of interest if somebody is expertising and then selling what they expertise, because it's sort of the fox guarding the hen house, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So do you ever hear this concern, and what is your take on that?
Obviously, we hear that. It's not different here in Germany. Some people have very big concerns about that. But let's say for the last 20 years or maybe 15 years, since everything is online and visible for everyone, you can screw people once or twice, and then everyone will know and you're out of the game. And the other very big pro for experts being also professional philatelists in dealing or auction houses, you just see so much more material, and you just get to learn so much more than when you're just an hobby expert who sits at home and only sees his small area. Because when, let's say, you expertise Memo, but then you also see stuff from Danzig, Saar, and the related areas. And if you're not a complete idiot, you will be able to understand much more just from seeing a lot of stuff. Yeah. So I think it's good.
And we've mentioned Memo a couple of times. Could you talk about, for people who maybe only know the overprint but don't know anything about the history of the country or the plebiscite, could you talk a little bit about what Memo was and also what other areas you expertise?
Okay, for the second question, I would have to look. Um, well, basically, it was the very eastern part of Prussia until basically the end of World War I, when it became a mandate. Is that a proper English term? I don't know. You don't know?
No.
Okay, anyways, the French had the saying for a couple of years. And then basically the Lithuanians went in and it became part of Lithuania. And then 1939, Germany took it back. Yeah. So, and because of all this history wind-ups, there are a lot of complications in expertising. For instance, you have the German cancellations that were in use up to 1923. And then they appeared back in 1939. So some smart people, knowing that some used stamps are scarce from 1923, they just took it, and instead of 1939, it was 1922 again on the cancellation, and they put it all on the stamps. And this is, I don't know if that's also a German thing with these backdated cancellations, but they are very keen about it, like doing research there on how you can tell if a cancellation has been backdated. And it works quite well, and you can distinguish many of them only if you have seen thousands of the same stamp and have a proper register of them. But that's one of the main problems of Memo, backdated.
And what's interesting about Memo is you have these stamps of France that are overprinted with Memo that are then canceled by German cancellation. You really get to experience this really messy political history.
Yeah, because all the German postal clerks, they just stayed there. They have been paid and everything. This was all part of the treaty, basically. Yeah, and even throughout the Lithuanian time, you see it basically all in German. The letters, everything is still in German, just the cancellations is Lithuanian spelling. So it's very interesting. And even nowadays, if you go, you will still find German signs.
You went to Memo for a very special time in your life. Is that correct?
Yes, we did a little tour there.
For your honeymoon?
No, God, no.
Oh, I thought it was your honeymoon.
No, my wife would have divorced me right away.
So I see these microscopes behind you.
Yeah.
And I know I was fascinated. You've showed me in the past how you will do overlays in Photoshop, and you will really use technology to advance your expertization. These are tools that were not available to people, 20 or 30 years ago. So can you talk a little bit about what is, because Heinrich Kohler, the founder of your company, was a great expert. Yes. And many of his opinions still hold true today. So can you talk a little bit about what is the same from Heinrich Kohler's days in the early 20th century when you look at a stamp today versus what you can do that he couldn't have even dreamt of?
Yeah. So of course the sharing part of this is that you need this original of the stamps. Some may think you can do it just digital. I tried, it won't work. You can have a lot of comparison material, especially for cancellations in a digital way. You don't need to own all of this. And really interesting, it gets, as you said, when you want to do like overlays and compare very small details. Because usually in the old time, you had to enlarge something, let's say to 400%, to be really able to tell a forged overprint apart from a genuine overprint if it was done well. But this is now very easily done. It used to be a very complicated procedure, and now you basically just do 2 scans, overlap them, and it's done. And you can save it right there and always have a proof of that you actually did compare and not just said will be okay. Yeah, and then another I don't know if you can really see, but there are two microscopes there.
Mm-hmm.
This one, it's basically just a gigantic magnifier. Goes up to, let me see, I think like 80 times. And the smaller one here is the one which is maybe even more interesting. You can go up to 960 times.
Wow.
So, but there, you don't see anything of the stamp anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's just paper fibers and pigments and so on. But these pigments are quite interesting, as many cancellations, overprints, etc., have very specific compositions of ink, and this you can really tell apart from with the microscope. So in some of my areas, they used basically the same cliche for the genuine and the fakes, and you actually can just tell apart by like minute differences in the alignment, and then under the microscope with the pigments. Can I share my screen here?
Yeah, that'd be
I would love that.
Okay. So just to really show what I just explained, it's much better to show this. So let's see. This is basically my structure here. I saved everything I find interesting.
I'm sorry, Toby, this is all in German. We can't read this.
It will be good, Charles. Everything. But these are just Michel numbers, so it shouldn't be too hard. So, for instance, this is one set of Lithuania, and it has rather primitive overprints. You see my screen, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. And you have 3 rather expensive stamps in the set. And then what I did, I went through thousands of stamps and analyzing the pigment structure. And I made this table, and I found out that the 3 expensive stamps, they all share the same pigments. And then I can check it here, and it shows me
Wow.
what the pigment structure should look like. And you see, it's more lilac.
Yeah.
This is green in the reality. And if you just look with the naked eye, it's all just black. So the forgeries, obviously, they are plain cheap black.
Wow.
Okay,
And you can find more common stamps that share the same characteristics as a comparison.
Yeah. This is an important thing. You see here in this column, you see a lot of these like normal stamps that cost nothing, have the same ink.
And what magnification is this at? This is
like 280 times.
wow. So that other one goes up to 900. You said.
Yeah.
Wow.
But then
At that point, you're looking at molecules, right?
Yeah.
So this is 500 times, and this is just one pigment now, which is typical for a specific overprint, of which many forgeries are around. So sometimes it's even easier before you start plating to just have a look under the microscope and says no chance anyhow, or okay, looks good, and let's have a look. Yeah, we're here. Yeah, but the problem is you can't explain this to a collector. They
Right.
think you're nuts.
So
Probably because it is.
but this is
It is a little
information.
nuts. Yeah.
This is information that you built yourself. So this isn't shared between experts, correct? Or you put this together?
Yeah, this is what I put together. Yeah.
Could you, if not, it's totally okay, but could you maybe share your screen again and show us an overlay to give a little demonstration of that?
Yeah, sure. Just let me.
The one that sticks out to me was the Flug Post Memo overprints. I thought were interesting.
Okay, let's see. As you can see, you can use it for many, like reperfing, and you can do a lot of stuff. Let's see, what is that? See, you have this overprint. It's also not as nice example because it's taken from a dark lilac stamp, so that's kind of hard to extract the overprint sometimes, but it works. Let's see if I can find a more interesting one where you can really, yeah. Okay. So you have here the overprint in question.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take, you see that, the flashing red?
Yeah.
Okay. And there you see it basically all fits quite well. Let's go to the A. See, even this small break here.
Yeah.
It just fits. And this is a hand stamp, so there is a slight variation is allowed depending on the state of the hand stamp. Yeah. And
so you would take a look at this and this would get your seal of approval.
This would get the seal of approval, yes. For instance, if you do these hand stamps, it's tricky sometimes. I do this a little smaller as I don't, it doesn't matter if people see it. So this is basically what you do with hand stamps. You see, okay, it's the very early time, and then you can see how stuff breaks, and if you have used material, you also know during which periods how the hand stamp should look like, and so on. And this is basically what you then.
Wow.
So you can watch it deteriorate in real time, and you can use the cancellations to put them in chronological order.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And then you here have what we call, what I call, I mean, there's not, no. This is, in reality, it's not black anymore. It's a blue overprint. It's a different color, and you can really tell from which period on it started to be fishy. Yeah. So this is what you can do with the overlays. This is the one I was looking for. This is a good example of they basically took parts of the original cliche and printed this on stamps, but the alignment isn't correct anymore. As you see here, it's the same position with all the small flaws the overprints have, but if you align one line, the others are off.
Wow.
So there's two different states of the same overprint?
One is genuine and one is forged.
But okay. But
they got their hands on the originals.
Even though it's taken from the original cliche.
Yeah.
So this is similar to the backdated cancellations, where they're using the same physical device to produce something. It has the wrong intention behind the production of it, which is what makes it a forgery. Is that a good way of saying it?
If back then it was wrong intention, basically it was maybe just making little money for your family. I don't know, but
it's true. Yeah, he's trying to.
Nowadays it's a little more troubling than maybe it seemed back then.
So, are there any pieces of advice that you like to give to collectors to maybe protect themselves? A bit of advice, because obviously, there are a lot of things that are shared between Memo and Czar and Danzig. But are there any? There's also differences that are unique to each area. But what would you tell a collector who's maybe trying to protect themselves a little bit, or trying to figure out whether a stamp is a good investment? Are there any general rules that you can give somebody to look after themselves?
Yeah, there are a few, and some of them may sound too simple. But for instance, if you're able to distinguish between the printing techniques like letterpress, lithography, intaglio, you're able to sort out maybe like 60% of the crap that's around.
When I had been living with you for about a month, you gave me a test on printing methods.
Yeah, I remember.
And I failed terribly because I had not yet worked in the business, and I would like to take that same test again someday to see if I've improved in the last 5 years.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
Maybe not. So learning, what is engraving versus what is surface printing versus what is a wood block. That's all something that can be applied across the globe.
Yes, yeah, obviously, and it's the same for overprints and basic stamps, because you see many of the forgeries around. They have been done by the cheapest method available then. For instance, you will hardly find fake engraved stamps, because it's just so complicated to make the plate and so on. And
in that same, by that same logic, an overprint might be a hand stamp, whereas it should be typeset, or the original would have been typeset, and now they're just it's inkjet, or it's rubber hand stamp.
Yeah. And I mean, for classic stamps or overprints, if you're really interested in an area, just buy the cheap one, and you have enough comparison material. If you just look long enough at close-ups, you will find differences that will make you suspicious if something is wrong. I didn't start differently. Basically, you just look at these things and what's different, and how is it possible? Is it possible that this is just a normal thing due to the printing process, or is something fishy? And yeah, what the advice I give to people is that I personally, if I just start new with an area, I wouldn't buy stuff without a certificate from a certain price level on. And in at least in Germany, that's basically what a lot of people do.
So if somebody's listening to this and they have had this light bulb over their head and they want to become a BPP expert,
send me an email.
Can an American become a BPP expert?
Yes.
If they're willing to travel to Germany to take the tests and everything.
For the tests, they would have to be there, yes. But living in Germany is not a necessity for this.
So on that same kind of note, how many people would you say that apply to take the first test and the second test never really make it, if you will? What is the, how many people don't make it?
Like 80 to 90%.
Wow. So they're only accepting 10% for, that's incredible.
This is, the sad percentage I can tell you from the last years, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And if I may, what is you said if you fail the first one, if you fail the second one, what's the criteria for failing the test? Is it a percentage of correct?
It's a percentage. It's a percentage. And basically, it's not like you have to do like a 95% test. I mean, no one can expect that.
Right, because you're just starting out. Yeah,
because you're just starting out, and you have 3 years with a tutor. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's more when we say, okay, we think he can do this, and very important, he is willing to learn, which interestingly enough is often not the case. So you really do have people thinking they already know everything and are just upset if you tell them that's not the truth. So they will never make it, obviously, because even I think I'm doing this now for 13 years.
Wow.
I wouldn't, if I look back, I'm sure I wasn't near a good expert back then. and this is where the tutor comes in again, and where he told you a few times, well, no. And you will never, that's actually the fun part. There hasn't been a year where I didn't learn something new or found a new discovery. Just the other weekend, I found, to many people, it's most likely not interesting, but in the literature, there is a specific overprint type only listed in 3 fields, and now I could prove it's in 5 fields. So it's just something for you personally, then not interesting for a lot of people. But
you said something earlier that Michael and I have actually talked about in a different context in the past. But you said that there's been some complaints that there's no school for becoming an expert, and that once you're in, there's a lot of support and there's a mentor and there's a lot of it sounds like once you get your foot in the door, the opportunities are endless. But getting people to that initial stage, do you see any sort of possibility or opportunity in the future for a graduate course in philately for a sort of a sanctioned like a college course almost to get people ready for that first test. Do you think that's something? And Michael informed me that the ANA, the American Numismatic Association, has a program like that for expertising coins in the U.S. And I don't think anything.
Yeah, it's a course. It costs about $400 or $500, and they give you like 10, 11 books that you're supposed to read, and then you have to take a test at the end. They
tell you about how coins are casted or other. Countries, blah blah. Okay.
How coins are made, specifically U.S. coins. So how U.S. coins are printed, forgeries, the differences between the different dies, and how to detect VAMs and Morgans and everything like that. And then you have to take a final test at the end, and then you can kind of go on and become an expert and work for. The piece of paper that you hold at the end holds more weight than if you were to walk into PCGS or NGC and just say, I want to be an expert. So it's kind of like a beginner course in how to become an expert.
Yeah, the idea is there. No solution yet. Obviously, people are thinking about it and trying to make that work. But maybe one of the biggest things that can't be taken away from the person who wants to become an expert is that he has to own a lot of stuff. Yeah, he has to own like the technology, he has to own his comparison collection, he has to own his card index register, which makes it very tough and extremely unappealing to young people to put like 20, 30, 40, 50K into.
Yeah. So I was wondering if it was inappropriate to ask, if you had to take the average BPP expert, what would you say the startup cost is in terms of? Yeah. On the one hand, you need.
I can tell you from my side. I don't know. I can't tell for the others, but including the technology and everything, it was around €40,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a big barrier to entry.
But there are opportunities to recoup that initial investment through the expertising. There's a financial incentive to doing this as well. As much as you love the stamps, and as much as I'm sure all the BPP experts love the stamps, there's also a future in making money at doing this. Is there not? If you're good.
Also, this depends very much on the area you will choose. I mean, if you choose some of the German states or maybe World War II, yes, you can make some serious money on that. If you take, but also there you won't get far with 20, 30, 40,000. And if you, for instance, take Memo, you can spend 40,000, and if you want to live on that, you go and look out for a nice bridge in Wiesbaden and stay there. So it's really a problem, and it's funny. I actually watched many of your videos by now, and I heard Marcus Orsi say that experts would need to make a living out of this, and this is very complicated. There are guys in the BPP who make a good living out of that, but these are not even 5 people from 100. And they invested 6-digit amounts to get there. Yeah.
So it helps if you have a profession within the hobby where everything you do at work is contributing towards your career as an expert as well.
Yes. And I also think that technology, if you're young and you're into technology and all this kind of stuff, this can help you a lot and save a lot of initial money. You don't need 10,000s of the same cancellations to start on. It's okay if you have these as digital copies, and I think this will go more and more into general acceptance, that you can have stuff as good scans. You can't do anything with a 300 or 600 DPI scan for expertising. It's not good.
You said you've been doing this 13 years, but also no one can know everything. If at one point you want to, you're specialized in MML, want to branch out and specialize in another area as well, is there a test you take for that, or do you just simply write to the BP?
No.
Yeah. You have
No,
to take
no.
another
It's
test to become a
basically
specialist in another area.
test number 2 over again.
Yeah.
You
okay.
don't have to redo the first test. Once you take that, you're
Once you take that, you're in there. If you really screw up, the board can decide that someone gets tutored again or has to take test number 1 again, or so. Yeah. So this is maybe another thing I didn't tell. In the BPP, you have individual experts, yes.
Yeah.
But there is a board who basically can decide that you either get kicked out, or like I said, you get tutored, or someone is coming to you and looking if you really do this the proper way. And there is something like is it? It's called Verbandsprüfstelle. I don't know how to say. It's more like a association of the experts who watches out over all the other individual experts. So if there's a dispute between 2 experts, they go to this special group of people who then get to decide and do some further testing, and then basically tell who's been wrong or right. And this has been working quite well for the last 50 years.
And how many BPP experts are there?
I would guess around 100 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like there's a good balance of individual accountability, but also oversight, so that somebody doesn't go rogue and just start writing certificates for whatever they want.
No. You get kicked out faster than you can say, money, come on in. Yeah.
Do you think that a system like this could ever find its footing in America? I know it's a tough question, but we are so entrenched with APS, PSE, PF, and PSAG. Do you think that this is something that could ever? Because you talk about an area like Hawaii could very easily have an individual expert, or early revenue, first issue revenue stamps could have an expert, or Kansas, Nebraska overprints could have an expert. Do you think this is something that could spread to other parts of the globe?
As I personally find this a good way, I personally could imagine, but it's very tough to judge on something that has been going on for decades. So, there are also people here who think it's very sad that we don't do it as a committee. So I guess you always have people on each side there. Yeah. But I do think that individual experts can have more knowledge, obviously, than a committee, even if they reach out to other experts. Yeah.
So Toby, do you have anythanything else you want to share about the process that you think people might find interesting? You're the expert here. So what?
Good question again. No, I can just hope that some people saw this and may find it interesting to also try to become an expert, or at least dig a little deeper into philately and teach themselves of how to tell the good apart from the bad, which can be a lot of fun and rewarding.
And you said something when we were off camera that I'll bring up again here. But so a lot of what we've talked about has been about fake versus real. Is the overprint genuine? Is it backdated? Is it genuine? There's also this category of items which are genuine, but maybe have been played around with a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So can you talk about the importance of looking for that? A corner that's been added, or regumming or reperf or something like that, because again, there's I'm sure plenty of great rare items that need to be described and acknowledged properly if they're going to change hands.
Yeah, sure. So besides all this color shades and perforation and overprints, obviously one of the most important parts of a value to the item is its condition. So has it been altered, or is it in the same state it's been printed and or used? And this is basically a large part and sometimes the most tricky part of the expertization. Some are done very, very bad. Some are done very, very good. And some I can say I may have not detected 12 years ago. But that's also, I guess, a normal process that the more you do, the more you understand. And that's what, if you are not very long into this, the card index register can actually help you out a lot. If you want, I just get a few cards from my register.
This is a concept that's very uniquely European and German specifically. So I would love to see.
It's unique to Germans? No.
To Europe, I think.
Okay.
It's much more widespread in Europe.
Okay.
Would you agree, Michael? Do you know people who have index cards of every example of a rare stamp?
No.
I mean, there's the Siegel census, obviously, which is fantastic, and that sort of thing. But I think this is much more of a European.
The Museum of Philately, I think, is
Museum of Philately.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, the concept of this card index register is that you can trace an item's history back to whenever. And I did this for area I want to do next, as this is most commonly done for the classical area. It's not so common for let's say, the plebiscites, because there aren't that many great rarities that have been offered already in the 1920s and so on. So, and the older it gets with the provenance, I think the more fun it is. For instance, then you have, just as an example, they look rather boring. It's basically just the item, the description, and the auction and the date when it's been sold. And then you just, if you have them in several catalogs, you just put them together. And if you get it for expertising, oftentimes you can see if the item has been played with. For instance, a corner was missing, that suddenly is there. A perf has been missing, that suddenly is there. Or what do you have often? The cancellation is faded and it's been painted in with pencil. You have that a lot. So
having images of an item from 100 years ago can be a huge, even if you couldn't detect, or even if it's difficult to detect the alteration by just looking at the item, you can say it has changed a lot in the last century, and therefore I know that it's been played with.
Yes, yes. But also there something, I think you also discussed this in one of your videos with Greg's daughter.
Daisy,
that to me also it's a big difference if you do something to an item to preserve it or to get more money out of it. It's a huge difference, and I think commonly understood in the art world is it's no problem to preserve something as long as you describe it. It's a different thing to do this to cheat on people, obviously. But this is something that I would think for all the classical rarities, it's something that people, will need to accept in a few decades, I guess, if they still want these things around.
Yeah. I was going to ask if you work with people like Daisy Todd who repair items for kind of preserving them, do they then report back to, if it's a rarity, for example, experts and everything in that field to let them know that they've repaired that item?
No.
No, yeah. You
No,
just kind of have to.
First of, so we don't send anything to a guy who repairs, obviously.
Yeah. That's a huge difference between the coin collecting era, or not era, but field is NGC, who expertise coins, actually have a conservation field as well, where if you submit a coin and they say this one needs to look a little better, we actually recommend that you submit this to the people who they'll clean it and they'll professionally make it look more appealing, and then they submit it for grading. So it's a huge difference where we don't do that in philately, but with coin grading, if you submit a coin that doesn't look nice and they think they can clean it properly, they'll clean it first, then submit it for grading. But that's a well-known, people accept that within the coin collecting world.
Yeah, and maybe the problem is stamps are a little more fragile than coin.
Yeah. Well, that and they don't want people to improperly. You see a lot of people trying to improperly buff coins out, or they clean it with chemicals that are too toxic, and it kind of fades the coin or stuff like that. So they want to do things correctly rather than people try and take it in their own hands and clean the coin and mess it up.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole repairing or altering stamps, it's a huge thing. And if you look back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it has rarely been described. Maybe even because people weren't aware too much of that problem. Where nowadays it's a huge part of the expertising, and maybe the largest portion of dispute when people don't agree with your opinion. When they say no, this has not been added or what so on, and yeah.
Well, can I ask one last question in that regard?
Yes.
Do you ever have difficulty deciding what to mention on a certificate and what not to mention? Because if you have a cover that's 150 years old, I think there's an expectation that there's going to be some natural wear and tear. If something passed through the mail, these things have lived for a century and a half. So do you ever find it difficult, when to call something out as a fault versus when to just accept something as natural?
Yeah, it's very tough sometimes, especially when you newly start with an area. Sometimes it's very tough to decide if something is still in a normal range or if it should be mentioned, especially because the German BPP people, they are liable for what they do. So if I write a certificate for something that's genuine and someone proves that it's fake, I will have to give him his money back. Not for
There's a huge difference between...
but for the stamp he purchased.
Yeah, huge difference between the American and the BPP in that regard.
Yeah, this is one tricky thing, and why many are careful. Yeah.
You mentioned people getting kicked out or retrained. Is there kind of like a bar if you get X many certificates incorrect, or is it a tier? Is that well defined or no?
No. It can't be well defined because there are people that write like 5,000 certificates a year.
Yeah.
They are obviously allowed a little more errors than someone who's writing 5 certificates a year. Yeah.
And last question. I know I just said last question, but do you ever just shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know?
Yes.
Is that acceptable for an expert to just say that the current technology doesn't allow me to confidently say one way or the other?
Yes. Of course. I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. For me, it's not a problem to say. I mean, I have a little note, then I say, please resubmit in 1-2 years, and maybe I found something out that helps me. Happens, especially for cancellations. Rarely for repairs, but sometimes it's, for instance, tough to tell exactly what has been done to the stamp. You can say it has been repaired, but to get to the total extent of what has been done, it's very tricky sometimes, especially when they're on piece or on cover. It's virtually impossible if it's done very, very well. If you want, I looked out for one more picture.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's one of the repairs that is so insanely good. You see this?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell what has been done?
No, on the top left, the corners, the corner in the left has been replaced.
So do you want me to line out what has been done?
Yeah.
Yep.
So this here has all been added. It was
all of it.
Stamp.
Yeah. Wow. Because it's darker.
Yeah, and you can really, if you go closer, you can follow the fibers and really see where the break is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these things are very tough to detect.
When would this have been done? Was this a classic repair? Was this done a long time ago, or is this a more modern technology?
No, actually, to my experience, these have been done quite a while ago.
Wow.
Nowadays, people don't have time to do that.
Funny that the fakes have gotten worse as technology gets better.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. But this is, I mean, it's not to scare people. I mean, this is a very, very rare occurrence here, that something has been done that good.
Wow.
Most things are just done very poorly. And I'm sure with a little training, 90% of the collectors would be able to tell.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have one final. I know Charles got to say his final question. I have one more. What happens if there's no expert in a specific field? So you want to go to you want to go into a field and they get accepted in the BPP and they put you under and you have to tutor for 3 years. What if there's no one to train under? Does that happen ever?
Yeah, sure. I think for most of my areas there was no one. This is why I took them, so they just had to take me. No.
Yeah.
No. They will try to get someone as close as it gets to your area. I mean, if you were to do US classics, they can give you any classic expert basically, because many of the questions, even though it's a completely different stamp, will be the same. You know, if a cancellation is painted in or a stamp has been repaired, it doesn't matter what stamp.
Yeah.
The bigger problem then for the BPP is to really judge if you know what you're doing. Yeah. When there's no one even close to that area, it's a rather tough job to tell. But usually, for the last, let's say, like, I don't know, decade or so, people need to have this card index register. And if you have a card index register, you really know what you're talking about, because you've seen thousands of cards and you had to sort it to a certain criteria, and basically just working a few days through one of those card indexes will tell you a lot. Yeah, so the assumption is if you have that, you know what you're doing.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Toby, thank you so much for joining us. I've really
it was fun.
It's been over a year since I saw you last, which is the longest gap between my trips to Germany for quite some time now. So I miss getting to hang out in person, and this was a fun consolation.
Good. Yeah. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Okay. Good. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I hope I didn't oversell that episode, but I really think this is, no offense to our previous guests, like top 3 for me, top 1 for me, maybe.
Top 1.
This is in the top 1 episode of all the episodes we've done.
Yeah. I feel like I say this about a lot of our episodes. It's just really invigorating to talk to these people and get excited about the hobby and everything. So
what are you going to become an expert in? If you're feeling that invigorated, what are you going to...
That's a great question. That's a great question. I really got to find something where there's not anyone, like Toby said, and so I'll have to be accepted.
Exactly.
It's super interesting to see, because we know how expertising works here in the U.S., and obviously you knew how it worked in Germany, but
right. But we don't often get a behind-the-scenes peek either. This is a very clandestine process where we send our stamps off and we don't see them for 2 months, and then they come back miraculously with an opinion. Well, and I think the fact that Toby pulls the curtain back a little bit.
That look into how he expertises material, into how he certifies whether or not it's real, the fact that he's utilizing the future technology almost, or current technology, but it just seems so futuristic in the world of philately, to ensure that the material that we're submitting is or is not genuine. It's more...
I love this paradox where he's using modern technology to detect repairs that were made 100 years ago.
Yeah. And even with modern technology, it's just it's difficult. it's hard, and we really need these experts. Like he said, it's not easy to get in. He said 80 to 90% of people do not make it into the BPP.
This is an open
That's
challenge.
crazy.
I'm challenging you and I to have a race. Who can become an expert first?
Yeah, we got to go to Germany to take the test.
Absolutely. That's an incentive in and of itself.
Yeah.
I'd go just to fail the test, just to have a trip to Germany.
80 to 90%. I can't get over that number. That not only did the use of modern technology to certify the material put me more at ease, but the fact that they're so strict with who they're accepting into this organization to allow material to be certified is just it's crazy.
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah.
So
You have to really be an expert.
Well, I hope that if you've made it this far, you were watching on YouTube. But if you weren't, if you were, you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. We're online at philatelypodcast.com. We have an email, philatelypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you, Toby, for taking the time to show us, to help us visualize. It's one thing to hear about it. It's another to see it. Mm-hmm. And just a huge thank you to Toby for taking the time to do this.
We got to have him back.
Let's try and stump him.
That'd be interesting.
I'm gonna try and create a fake Memo overprint to see if I can get one past Toby.
Good luck. Did you see what? That's insane. That all the research that he's built by himself. Yeah. I was just flabbergasted at the fact that this information is not shared between experts. This is his work that he has on his computer in these massive files to help him expertise material. I
think I can get him. No, let's have him back on it. Exactly, pencil. Let's have him back on to maybe do a test. I'm gonna buy some random stamps. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna send them to Toby, and I'll see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting because we've seen how he does things, but him showing us directly what, like with the stamp that we've submitted. Yeah, that'd be super interesting. This is a great episode. I really enjoyed it.
I did as well, and let's do it again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good, man.
All right.